Hello, everyone. This is the Love Foundry, Conversations in Consciousness, and I'm James Daniel. So we've been having short podcasts for the last few days, on streams of love, the very love that we need to empower ourselves with in order to have a life that demonstrates that kind of empowerment. So we talked about the third stream, which is the mother, the feminine, which is intelligence, the Holy Ghost of religion, and all that makes up the Divine Mother throughout the universe and in our worlds. And the stream that is the Father, which is the initiating energy of will and purpose coming from that source, life's source. And then in the merging of those two and in the production of what those two do when they come together and co-create is born the sun energy, which has in our experience in humanity a number of manifestations going back countless centuries and under various names in various civilizations. But most recently, in the civilization that we're just now leaving, like it or not, the Piscean civilization, in the form of the Christ consciousness, as it demonstrated by Jesus, the Nazarene, who seemed to have come by it honestly as that incredible consciousness which steers the universe with love, entered into the human race through the agency of one individual and is thereby joined with us. And somehow through the mysterious process of the crucifixion and the resurrection becomes the property throughout humanity of every single individual. Now, this is a remarkable concept, an impossible concept, one that we certainly didn't initiate except by need, like a drowning person initiates someone saving them. But it's here, and I think it's required of us, if we care to continue as a group, that we take it into our counsel and into our human considerations as the reality for which it is. And that does not mean the reality that some church or organization says it is. Lots of people interpret the experience. The disciples themselves interpreted it to some degree, but more than trying to interpret it, they really just strived to record it as it happened, along with the events that carried along with it, so that we, at this stage of our experience with it, could look back and say, okay, what was meant by that? And so we have those recordings, as accurate as they may or may not be. We're not here to debate any of that. We don't really care. We're going to make our own interpretations. If we have our own relationship with love, that's what we do. And we're not concerning ourselves except tangentially with the Old Testament, which is the story of things that happened before this great spiritual entity joined humanity in its forward journey towards perfect consciousness, which is, when we are fully invested in love, becomes Christ consciousness. Now, we can't do justice to this in a short podcast like this, and I don't have others on the call with me today to interact with, which really helps deepen and broaden the subject, because then we get to respond to other opinions and questions. So we'll just sort of take a really, what I call a really important perspective view. And so I want to sum it up under this heading. And before I do that, I'd like you to take a think about who we are and what we're up to. This is the Love Foundry. We are here to help people empower themselves with love. And that's to help people do that for themselves, because certainly no agency outside of ourselves can do that. Certainly all agencies, including Christ himself or Christ consciousness or any of the great spiritual teachers or leaders of the human race, from Buddhists and Krishna and all those other beings that cared to help humanity in one way or another, all of them can help, but only we can do it. And that's because of the ingredient that co-creates with us, which is our free will. It can't be overstated as in terms of value, because it's the gift we are bringing to it. It's the life we are perfecting. And while right now we don't see how human free will is maybe all that significant in the universe, but I think if you persist along these lines, you will see. It will begin to become apparent that there is a great experiment underway in the universe, and our Earth is part of it. And that is the combination of free will, human free will. We can assume a lot of other beings have free will, but that doesn't mean that they do. If they act in accordance with love, it's because that's their life. That's their natural inclination and always has been. But if you're doing it with free will, as Jesus did, he had a choice, you see. That's what makes the temptations of Christ in the story so significant. It means he had a choice. And having evaluated the options that all those choices meant, and for a person of his potency, that was a lot of options. He still chose to significantly align himself with love itself. And that choice is open to each and every one of us. And that's the core of one of the Christian biblical teachings about relationship with God and all of that sort of thing. Now, we're not advocating any of that to anyone under any particular appeal or technique or way of doing it. It's up to everyone to figure that out for themselves. And so I personally don't subscribe to any one thing. But in this conversation, because I think it's so valuable to the human race that it can't be set aside in discussing how to empower yourself with love, because that's the first clear and most recent expression of something absolutely impossible to imagine happening, which is perfect love as conscious being joining you or me or anyone. In this case, it was someone who was prepared for it in some way and could handle it, to live, to coexist with you and offer you itself at the behest of your free will, without judging you or pushing on you or imposing upon your personal needs. So in this conversation, we're going to look at what I call the personality of the Christ. Not Jesus. I don't know what his personality was like. From all accounts, he was an extraordinarily martial person, which means he was very focused with his will, very clear about his intent, and carried forward with great courage and definition. And we see that because he faced forward into his relationship with love and broke it not at all. Not at all. Not in word or act or deed did he betray it for a second, all the way through death, which apparently was the cause that brought about the effect of the resurrection in some form. So I don't know about his personality. Barely know much about my own. But I think that each of our personalities is shaped by the life we've lived, by who we are when we were born, in terms of our inner nature and experience, not by heredity, but by what we own. So you can think of baby. All babies are just blank slates, and life just writes on them. But I think we are beginning to recognize by the reactions of even infants, but certainly young children, to their environment and what they bring to it tells us that there's something there. Now, we subscribed that to genes, or we subscribed it to inheritance. And it seems to, and I'm saying that inheritance has no impact, because the body that you're living in certainly is a manifestation through many decades of the ancestors you had. But that body is not who you are. And so while they've done all those studies, like the Jukes and the Kallikaks, where they compared them to the Huxleys and different families that were very successful, but those don't tell the whole story. And because we haven't been able to validate fully reincarnation, we can't account for everything yet. But it's accounted for by life, by the circumstances that actually are true. And if we're honest intellectually, we don't really care, because whatever the truth is, that's what we've got. So like it or not, what it is, it is. And so stay open, stay aware, and pay attention, and let's take a look. But what I'm discussing here is something else. I'm discussing building the personality in us that is so fully invested with perfect love that it becomes the personality of the Christ consciousness. And it's a number of things depending on the individual who has it. But there are certain things that could be said about it. So we're not advocating it. We're not telling you to do something to do it. Empowering yourself with love is going to probably produce that result at some point in time. But what I'm asking is for people to take a look at how this lives in you and how you feel inner response towards it. And just let that live with you for a little while. And it will draw into your life things from outside of it that will be stimulated by your thinking about it, by your looking at it, by your inquiry about it in yourself. And then things will start to come together, and I think you'll form a very clear idea one way or the other on the subject. So what do we mean by the personality of the Christ? So let's take a look at the Christ. Separate Jesus out from it for a few minutes. He's busy doing other things right now. So let's look at Christ consciousness, a thing that he is fully invested in, to the point that his own human personality was surrendered to that personality to be purified, infused, and transformed, transmuted, and made graceful, in the sense of the grace of love, in addition to his own personality, giving the two of them a singular unity, which means that he's still evolving his personal self-focus in the universe and growing himself, but he's also in harmony with that great perfection that is the personality of Christ consciousness. So what would it be, and how do we align ourselves to that and even look at it? And do we want it? Well, the human personality, which is not a long-term thing, it really kind of only was born a few thousand years ago, because before that, people had no self-conception of personality. It was sort of, I knew who I was if I was somebody back in the day, way back in the day. Maybe because I had been around a while and I had a role in my tribe of doing something, or the way I was living in the world. But I didn't really think of myself as having a personality because there really wasn't a group discussion going on like we have on Instagram about what different people think and how their opinions matter to them and other people and all of that stuff, which we have going on today in great volume. So it's kind of what I would call a recent invention. And it goes maybe about the time of the Greeks. Maybe a little before that, but remember the Greeks go back quite a ways. I'm speaking of, maybe up to 1,000 years before Christ, Greeks. At least 400 and 500 years before Christ, Greeks. Around the time we had the great Greeks, like the Stoics, as they call them, which is like Plato and Aristotle and others, they began to have ideas about self and talk about self and dialogue about self. And then it's gone on from there towards existentialists and psychologists and psychiatrists and various philosophers. And it's, of course, a huge subject in the church, Catholic Church, and some of its people because of this identity of Jesus and what he was like. But it isn't often discussed in the church context in terms of personality, like it would have been by Freud or someone. So when we synthesize all this together and take a look at it, then we can get a sense of what's going on here. Because in the common understanding of personality today, the human being has basically four things. The physical body, okay, got that. Emotional body, yep, got that. Mental body, yep, got that. And a fourth thing, which is referred to most commonly by people who try to discuss fourth dimensional things as maybe the etheric body, which is the energy body behind and underneath, which connects us to the, quote, spiritual world or the spiritual body. And so if you took the spiritual body, which must have many members and many aspects and many elements, and reduce it down to just a body, etheric, living in us, connecting us to that, without trying to break it down and define it, then we have a sort of spiritual connection. Now, in love, we're going to presume for a moment that the Christ aspect of love and empowering ourselves with love is going to come to us from that fourth location. That location that the geometry of three-dimensional geometry, like Pythagorean geometry, cubes and triangles and spheres and those sort of shapes, we don't know how that geometry can transform itself into that next dimension, or how that next dimension's geometry, whatever that geometry looks like, can unfold itself into the material world as three-dimensional geometry. That's a very complicated idea that we don't quite know how to address in science, although it is addressed by certain spiritual teachers under various discussions and points of view. And so, but from that invisible world where love itself emerges into human expression, we have streams. That's where these three streams, the stream that brings us the feminine expression and all the intelligence, and the divine feminine as love. The divine feminine can be rough. If you go back in history long enough to get to the Amazons or Lilith or some of the earlier mythical manifestations of divine feminine, it wasn't as loving as it could have been, so to speak. But somewhere along the line, we came to the expression of, and even Eve is not discussed in terms of love, it's discussed in terms of other qualities of femininity, but not love itself. That appears for us in sort of a Kuan Yin form in the Orient, in the Asian cultures, and it appears to us in various names, starting with Isis, and then Eve's manifestation as Mary in the Christ story, where she is the perfect mother of Jesus, who is able to embody love perfectly in himself. So these manifestations come along, but it isn't until we get to the more recent story of love that we see it in the feminine, and we begin to realize, not just from the birth of Christ, because that's just a story, really, but the Sophia, which was the name of Christ's mother, the Sophia that gave birth to Jesus, carries on after that birth and becomes, she's his mother up until a certain age when he tells her, I'm okay now. And that's his bar mitzvah, basically, when he explains to her that he's about his father's business, which relieves her of the responsibility and duty. We don't know where Joseph was at this point. He seemed to be somewhere kind of vaguely around. But he relieves his mother of the responsibility of taking care of him because he takes it upon himself. He's his own man now, his own manhood. So she elects, following the events of him, well, we don't know what she was doing with him up until 30, when they went off together, and I suppose Joseph came along. Forgive me, I'm not much of a Bible scholar. But they went off together somewhere to the east, Egypt, or north to India or Tibet or someplace or another. Various ideas about it, but they went off somewhere to prepare Jesus for the experiences that were to come, we assume, because the experiences that were to come were not average. And the only people on the planet that had any conscious experience with this level of potential or possibility were living at that time in the Buddhist and Hindu world, pretty much. Remember, the Buddhists came along about 500 years before Jesus. So there were ashrams and schools of teaching, Vedanta schools and Buddhist schools and Hindu schools, and the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata, and stories about gods and man and these powers. So anyway, she's along for that ride and eventually comes back with him. And when he undergoes the baptism of John on the Jordan, and this spirit of love descends into him, takes up residence with him inside the human consciousness. And he does something incredibly remarkable. He opens up himself to it completely. He opens up his I, capital I, and says, okay, you can come in. I welcome you into the absolute depths of my most sacred self, the Holy of Holies of my temple. And the merging of those two creates the story that unfolds, because immediately that power that enters him and joins him as his personality starts acting through that personality. And he was sufficiently clear in his emotional stream and his mental stream and his physical body that he could transmit these remarkable energies without causing difficulty of one kind or another. Because then it seems to be, as we go about watching the healing that occurs through his short 3 years, that it's impurities of one kind or another in these various bodies that are cleared by love at its extreme abilities that make people healthy and whole. He was clearing people's minds, emotions, and physical bodies of disease, transmitting it through himself with the help of Christ consciousness. Now, any human being other than Jesus has within them the ability to do exactly the same thing, if what he said is correct. What greater things you will do than I have done, because I've gone to the Father, which has an entirely different meaning other than the fact that he's giving us the power to surpass him. He's telling us that because he has gone and connected himself to the Father's stream of life, it's going to bring a power in for us to use, in addition to what is already mighty in his personality. So we can hope for that and look for that, but let's stop and deal with the personality of the Christ himself. Not necessarily as it is today, although we would like that, but at least as it was when it was demonstrated, and remembering all spiritual progress changes. The spiritual progress of the Jews changed with Jesus. Big time change, to which they were having a real difficulty adjusting, obviously, due to the circumstances of murdering the poor guy. But they were having some difficulty, at least the church was. I don't know about the common people. They seemed to like it as long as the miracles were coming. But in the end, they rejected him because it was just too big a change from what they'd been doing for thousands of years. If you've been going to the well for thousands of years, a certain way to get the water, and someone comes along and says, no, the water's over here now, it can create an argument out of genuine concerns. Maybe that's not right. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe it's going to cause a problem. Either way, they didn't deal with it well, and Jesus paid the price. So in the end, that personality is still here. And a perfect personality is the result of love, passing through the mind body, the emotional body, and the physical body without any obstructions. And if we take it on as a personality structure in ourselves, it's going to conflict with things that are in our already existing personality structure. And if we realize that free will is the root of all of these changes that will occur in us, we recognize, okay, the good news is I can do this if I want. I can say, let that mind which is in Christ, consciousness, be in me, and really mean it. But if it enters, it may conflict with some other part of me, like maybe I'm clinging to some resentment towards somebody who stole from me or hurt me or did something to somebody I care about. So then I have to look at that. And the Christ consciousness personality says, I don't hold grudges. I forgive and heal so that all people who make mistakes can find their way to me. Okay. Well, that leaves me with saying, all right, then let's go ahead and forgive this clown that stole my car or something. Now what? Well, things happen as a result of love in our consciousness, in our personality. Transformations happen, transmutations happen, grace flows, and maybe towards that which I've been holding on to. Now, that poor guy, that was a long time ago that person did whatever they did to me, maybe in high school, maybe younger. And certainly they don't even remember it. So why should I? Well, it's much easier to remember something done to you than something you did to someone else, unless it was really shocking to you. You hit somebody in a bar fight and accidentally killed them. That you won't forget. You won't. So, but other slights, the people who stepped on accidentally, the people we broke stuff and never paid for it, the people we borrowed something and never took it back, the girlfriend we took away from somebody who really thought they were going to be in love with them forever. Stuff like that gets lost in the stream. But if we're holding on to a resentment about it because it happened to us rather than us doing it to someone else, then it might show up and resist the Christ saying, love and forget. Love and heal. Love that person. Love thy brother as thyself, no matter what. So that's part of the challenge that we experience. So that means when we look at the process in the Love Foundry, the workshop in the Love Foundry of investing power into your life through the power of love into your personality life, these are the things we have to face. How do we do this? Because you're going to expect the common response that everybody has. If there's something in you that's going to be a dam to resist the flow of love through you to the outside world, to other people, to the black people you don't like, or to the immigrants you don't care about, if something's going to block that in you, because somebody told you that they're bad people, that we're good people, they're bad people, all that kind of racial crap. If there's something in you doing that towards anyone else, then love is going to be bounced back at you. Say, no, I've run into some resistance here. So setting aside our current ego and its resistances to analysis and resolution through love is part of the process. It's a process. It's a wonderful process because you don't have to do the forgiving. Love will join you and do the process that your willingness to forgive brings into a freeing, a transforming, a transmuting. These are powers of love, not powers of human personality. They're powers of divine personality. So if you bring those two coexistent with you and say, okay, I'll forgive. I want to forgive. I want to let it go. But you got to help me because it's a wall I built in there. Every time I thought about it, I got madder about it. And it's been years and I've accumulated this big asphalt pavement over my relationship to this person that stole my girl like Rocky Raccoon. Now, when we invite love into our process, and then we bring those two together, our past and love, and our willingness to let ourselves transform, then things start to happen. Really, a miraculous things start to happen, depending on your commitment and your sincerity, which is totally up to you, not anyone else, up to you. Free will is the instrument of change. That's it. And your receptivity to that change. So that's one of the things we have to do. The other is putting yourself in relationship to love. In other words, how do I invite it in and know it's here? Because I feel like I'm on a desert island when it comes to love. How do I get it to wash up on the beach for me? And then join me. Well, that's a process too. That's a process of identifying and bringing it in and affirming its location inside of you as an active part of your process. It takes a bit of doing, but when you do it, and it's not a hard thing to do because you are equipped to do it. You have the process of imagination, you have the process of visualization, you have the process of invocation, which is an act of will, and evocation is the response of that act of will. Lord, join me here in this mess. And then the Lord joins you there in the mess. You don't necessarily register that joining, so you have to create a way in which you affirm it, like a visualization. But the truth is that you cannot express seriously in a committed way towards the universe, towards God in the universe, towards love in the universe, without getting heard. You're always heard because you have a voice and you're a living being, and living beings with voices are always heard. They're always heard by a variety of beings. So you will be heard, and if you accept the presence of it in response to what your invocation is, you'll know it's there. You can feel it. It takes a bit, and then pretty soon it's automatic. You express, and you have the sense of that presence right there with you. So you build this little process into a working activity inside us that brings our personality, as we've developed it up to now, through our life and the circumstances, good and bad, and we bring it into relationship to the personality of Christ consciousness. And what we're realizing, now this is the hard part to think about, but look at it. Look at it with your heart. Look at it with your mind. Look at it with your experience. It's the coming into the material world through a human being as a active physical presence, a physicalizing of that personality that brings it from its highest altitude down to and onto the physical world, and thereby makes it available to every other human being, every animal on the planet, every plant on the planet, and every mineral life. You see, suddenly it's the materializing of the Christ presence in a human being. Other beings don't have self-conscious awareness. I do. You do. Everyone does. You not only have free will, you have a self-conscious awareness. You're aware of yourself having that free will and the freedom to choose to use it to bring that personality down onto earth in yourself if you want to. If you want to. You don't have to want to. And many don't want to for lots of reasons. So, but we're presuming that a lot of people do want to, and that's why the Love Foundry is founded, to help people affect that power of love in them. Not some personality like Jesus' personality or anyone else's. That personality, which is love's perfect personality, in your personality, the two of those synchronized together. So, and that's a group personality, isn't it? Because perfect love is perfect love. It's going to look different in every individual because we are different. So we're not all going to look like clones of the Christ, but in terms of perfect love in your mind, perfect love in your heart, perfect love in your feelings, perfect love in your body, we will all be identical and expressing it uniquely through the I that is our unique, individualized personhood, which never ends. That's going, no matter how much love you pour into yourself, you're never going to lose I. The I will just simply be an expression of love as I, rather than a love you now, don't love you later kind of guy or girl. And that's because we approve or disapprove of actions. Neither the approval or disapproval of actions was never intended to be a withholding of love. Why would it be? When did you stop loving your 4-year-old child simply because he's saying, no, I'm not going to eat the peas? No, I'm not, and hit the spoon and scatter peas all over the house. I've got 3 kids raised. I get how that goes. So this personality approach to love invokes the personality of Christ consciousness, because that's that's what's up. That's what's going on in the human race. And when we look at it, there are those that are expressing more of it and those that are expressing less of it towards each other and themselves. A lot of people don't treat themselves well in terms of the Christ consciousness or anyone else. So I want that to be a developed conversation so that we can help work our way through the integration of your personality with its mind, emotions, and thoughts, physical form, with that ideal perfect love that gave itself to the world so that the world could give itself to it over time through free will. And eventually the merging of the two transform humanity into something incredible, and reveal to the universe a secret buried in humanity which is greater than all the secrets of the world, which is something we will discuss perhaps on the next podcast, because I think it's up now. It's up in the world. The world's going down in flames. Our civilization as we have known it has come to a place like the Romans did and the Egyptians did and the Babylonians did and everybody else. They come to a place where it's time for them to grow into a greater expression of human unity. That's all a civilization is how do we work together with each other? So in this one that's fallen apart, we form separate countries, and we form separate racial groups and spiritual groups and other types of groups, and we worked out arrangements with each other and cut deals and went to war with each other and have done all of these things. Now it's time for a better basis of creation, one where love is the creative power in the groups that come together to form a common unity. Now that might look like a big stretch to you. It certainly does to me. Yes. Because it is an ideal. But we start with an idea, which can only be founded on something that's true. Christ consciousness as an idea, as a pure spirit, already is a complete unity. Completely. Everywhere in the universe, spirit is. Then from the idea, we create an ideal. So how does that work on our little planet with our different races and groups? How do we get that to express that kind of unity? Well, then we run into some trouble, but we work up an idea that maybe with this demonstration of compassion and love, compassion of the Buddha and the love of the Christ, we can create something that goes from the ideal to the idol. The idol is what happens when it manifests in the world. And the idol comes from knowing. You have to convert the idea to the ideal to knowing what it is in a physical form, at rest in it. Then all of a sudden we see it actually is. Now, when you do it as a group, all of the humanity together, it's a moving idol. It's not stationary like Easter Island statues. It's how the form of our civilizations and our group expression together, which is our commerce, our shipping, our money, our religions, our ideas, how we work all these out together so that nobody's inconvenienced, so that nobody's harmed by anybody else's experience. If we bring that down to the world and we do that with love, then no one will be harmed. And that will be true because we don't want them to be harmed. We want them to be uplifted, upheld, served by love. And that can happen. So now is the time to put that to the test in ourselves. And if we think a little about the personality of love as a unity, especially when we put that unity together as a beautiful person, and then we inspire it with the spirit of love, now it becomes a dynamic being. But a dynamic being with perfect love, perfect intelligence, and will going forward. That's a powerful concept. It's just put it together in you, and it will not be a concept, it will be an activity. Nobody's missing anything. Everybody's got everything in them it takes to do this. Some people are blocked from it. Some people are blocked their whole life because they have lost capacity to think, or they've been in an accident and severely injured, or some way in which they're going to have to experience it in another lifetime, or aren't going to be able to participate freely in that way unless miraculous healing comes to them, which certainly can through a pure personality connected to perfect love or Christ consciousness. That's either true or it's not. If it's true, and I think it is, evidence demonstrates it is, and there's things happening now in the world that are proving it, and we have the internet to bring these to our attention. Half of it is bullshit because it's being lied to produce clickbait. But in the midst of all of that, there is that which is miraculous that's happening. So let's keep open to that. Let's pull that towards ourselves. Let's invest our inner qualities in those qualities that make that happen, and let the fusion of the two bring about that in us, in ourselves, and then through ourselves in the space around us. It's time for that to happen. And however we have to step up to make it happen, let's make the effort. And here's the thing that's unique, and which is why the Love Foundry is here. With each other's help, stepping up to do that becomes just busting a mission together. Together. If you come and say, look, I really want this, then I can say, okay, let me see how I can help you get that. If we're committed to helping each other do that, and you're committed to having it happen in your life, then the power of commitment to draw out of nature the things necessary to produce the result we want appear. They always appear. And if we act on those things, if we act on what we want together creatively in harmony with love, you're going to see how quickly this starts to catch fire in the world. And when it catches fire in the world, it starts to clarify itself and becomes something we can do over and over. You can go down to the corner and get a pretty good yogurt. It's not really yogurt, it's ice cream flavored yogurt, or yogurt flavored ice cream, or whatever the heck that stuff is. But it's pretty darn good, and you can get it on almost any corner. Flavored in almost any flavor. So when we put our mind to something we want, we get it some way or another. And if it's a step ahead for the whole human race, that's even better. And this has nothing to do, not nothing to do with, but it is not necessary that any existing religion be incorporated into this. It can be if you want it to be. If that's your passion, that's your faith, that's your family belief. But if it isn't, that's fine. Love exists absolutely independent of any organization, priest, theosophy, or anything else. It's just there. Like the Lost Dutchman gold mine. It's there to be found. Well, I think someone just found it recently, actually. Maybe it's King Solomon's mines we're looking. Oh, I think they found those too. All the secrets are being revealed. But the real treasure lies inside of you. Perfect love. As a personality. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. I keep moving this forward because that draws it in. And all you got to be is in the path of it. And pretty soon it draws into us. And we realize, I didn't have to figure any of this out. I don't have to go to school somewhere to learn it all. It explains itself once it's in us. It's amazing. Opening into love can just open up like that, and immediately you know what you're looking at. Because the inside of us, the way inner being in us, is already living there and transmits to the outer being of us, to our personality, our human consciousness, what it's experiencing and why and how. And it all just goes, wow. It's just amazing, but there it all is. So have some faith in yourself. Have some faith in the power that's growing in the world to make this something knowable. And give a little room in you for the idea of the perfect personality of the Christ consciousness to live in you. And what would that look like? because we're going to take it up some more. Thank you, and have a great day.
Don't you wanna know about love? Wanna know love? Don't you wanna know? Don't you wanna know?